the first thing people notice is the silence. Not the kind of silence you hear in a calm market, but the kind that comes right before something breaks. A tension in the air. A feeling that everyone is pretending everything is normal while quietly praying it actually is. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at the economy. It starts with a question nobody wants to ask. What if the next crisis isn't coming from somewhere new, but from something old, something we thought we left behind? Because the deeper you look into today's economic landscape, the more it starts to resemble a ghost. A ghost from 95 years ago. One that still haunts every stock chart, every bank balance sheet, every whisper from Wall Street. The ghost of 1929. People think the Great Depression was a black and white photograph, a moment sealed in history. But it wasn't a moment. It was a pattern, a cycle, a blueprint of how greed builds, how confidence blinds, and how systems collapse long after the warning signs were obvious. And today, those warnings are back. Record-breaking stock valuations, markets levitating on pure optimism, governments drowning in debt, speculation spreading through every corner of the financial world. It feels familiar, too familiar. But to understand why, we have to step backward for a moment. Not to 1929 itself, but to the atmosphere that existed right before it. A world buzzing with confidence, wealth rising at an unbelievable pace, ordinary people throwing their savings into stocks because they were told it couldn't fail. And the strange part? That world feels uncomfortably similar to the one you and I live in right now. In the late 1920s, America was electrified by growth. Radio companies, automobile manufacturers, and new technologies created the illusion that prosperity would never end. Politicians promised stability. Banks promised safety. Newspapers insisted everything was under control. And the public? They believed it. But beneath the surface, the structure was cracking. Credit expansion exploded. Margin debt skyrocketed. Speculation became a national sport. And inequality stretched wider and wider as the rich pulled away from everyone else. Nobody cared, because everyone was making money until they weren't. And this is where history becomes dangerous, because every time a bubble forms, it forms the same way. Confidence outruns reality. Greed outruns caution. Optimism outruns arithmetic. And that exact dynamic is unfolding today. People look at 2024 and 2025 with the same excitement the world had in 1928. New technologies create trillion-dollar stories. Speculation feels like strategy. Every dip feels like an opportunity. Every warning feels like noise. But somewhere behind all that noise, something else is moving, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, the same way it moved in the late 1920s. Debt. Not personal debt, not household debt, but systemic debt, the kind that rewrites global economies when it gets too large. Governments today borrow at levels that would have been unthinkable even a generation ago. Corporations leverage themselves into oblivion. Consumers chase lifestyles financed entirely by credit. And central banks, the institutions meant to stabilize everything, keep printing, pushing, and manipulating just to keep the system from slowing down. This is where the ghost of 1929 begins to take shape. Because before the Great Depression became a collapse, it was a denial. A denial that things could go wrong. A denial that growth had limits. A denial that risk was real. That denial was the true trigger, not the crash itself. And look around. We're living in a time where denial is once again the dominant policy. Interest rates, inflation, asset bubbles, political instability. Every warning signal is explained away, minimized, or ignored. Exactly like 1928. But here's the twist most people don't know. The actual crash of 1929 wasn't the worst part. It was what came after. The cascade of failures. The liquidity evaporations. The bank runs. The debt liquidations. The emotional shock that spread through society like smoke in a closed room. Today's system is far bigger, far more leveraged, and far more interconnected than anything the world had in 1929. Meaning the next collapse, if it comes, won't just be financial. It'll be psychological. It will change how people trust money, banks, governments, markets, everything. And this is where our story truly begins. Not with a crash, but with the parallels that are too sharp to ignore. The ghost isn't just similar. It's familiar. It's close. And depending on where this path leads next, it may already be walking beside us. And once you recognize that familiarity, you start noticing something else. Something quieter, something that doesn't appear in headlines but moves underneath them like a current. The psychology. Because before any financial collapse, the psychology collapses first. In the late 1920s, people believed markets could only go up. They believed innovation made risk obsolete. They believed the new economy had changed the rules. Sound familiar? Today, we carry the same belief, only dressed in modern language. We call it tech disruption. We call it institutional support. We call it quantitative easing. We call it the Fed will fix it. Different words, same trust. And it's that trust, not the numbers, that keeps the machine running. But when trust becomes blind, it stops being stability and starts becoming fuel. Fuel for speculation. Fuel for excess. Fuel for a collapse that nobody thinks can happen. In 1929, people weren't reckless because they were stupid. They were reckless because the system rewarded them for it. Right up until the moment it didn't. Margin loans were easy. Speculation was normal. Borrowing to invest became a lifestyle. And in today's world, it's all back. Leverage hiding in corporate balance sheets. Consumers financing lifestyles with debt. Investors absorbing risk without understanding the downside. Governments pushing growth by printing money instead of building productivity. You can almost feel the echo if you stare at the charts long enough. But the similarity runs deeper than debt and speculation. It's in the silence surrounding them. The silence of policymakers who assure the public everything is contained. The silence of corporations who need markets to stay high. The silence of investors who don't want the party to stop. The silence of ordinary people who feel something is wrong, but can't explain it. This is the same silence that wrapped around 1929, the silence before the structure gave way. And in that silence, a pattern begins to emerge. Look at how money behaves today. Prices soar, then plateau. Wages stagnate while assets explode. The rich accelerate upward while everyone else fights to stay in place. That's the inequality curve of the late 1920s, almost identical in shape. Back then, productivity gains were captured by the top. Today, technology gains are captured by the top. Different drivers, same outcome. And when inequality stretches too far, something cracks, not always violently at first, but quietly, like a floor under pressure. The middle class weakens. Demand softens. Credit steps in to fill the gap. Debt becomes the temperature control for an overheating system. And the system runs hotter and hotter until it burns through its fuel. This is where the ghost of 1929 starts breathing down our necks. Because in both eras, the economy didn't fail from outside pressure. It failed from internal imbalance. Imbalance disguised as prosperity. Back then, people called it the Roaring Twenties. Today, we call it record highs, all-time peaks, unstoppable growth. But growth built on fragile foundations is not growth, it's leverage. And leverage always has a repayment date. The scary part? In the 1920s, leverage was visible, printed in newspapers, discussed publicly, debated openly. Today, leverage hides inside shadow banks, hides inside derivatives, hides inside private markets, hides inside pension funds that need unrealistic returns just to stay solvent. It's not just a bubble. It's a bubble wrapped inside a system that pretends bubbles don't exist anymore. That's why the modern danger isn't a carbon copy of the Great Depression. It's a magnified version of the conditions that preceded it. A world wired together by speed, liquidity, and algorithms, where a spark travels faster than any regulator can react. The 1929 crash spread in days. A modern crash would spread in minutes. And that's the part nobody wants to think about. Because the ghost isn't coming from history. It's coming from everything we built since history. And once you start seeing these parallels, it becomes impossible to unsee them. They show up in every chart, every policy announcement, every desperate attempt to keep the system running just a little longer. In 1928, the warning signs didn't appear all at once. They arrived slowly, one distortion at a time. Manufacturing slowed down even as stock prices hit new highs. Farm incomes collapsed while Wall Street celebrated. Banks loosened lending standards because everyone else was making money, and no one wanted to be the cautious one. But nobody cared. Not because they didn't see the weakness, but because the weakness was invisible beneath the noise of rising markets. Today's economy moves with that same strange duality. You see headlines about record stock valuations, but quietly beneath them, Corporate bankruptcies are accelerating. You see reports of strong GDP growth, but beneath the surface, productivity has been stagnant for years. You see personal wealth hitting new highs, but only for the same narrow segment of society that benefited in the late 1920s. What's on paper looks impressive. What's underneath looks exhausted. And that exhaustion shows up in the smallest details, the ones economists rarely talk about. Households compensating for stagnant wages by borrowing against their futures. Governments rolling over debts that everyone knows will never truly be paid. Corporations buying back their own shares not because business is booming, but because it keeps the illusion alive. These aren't signs of strength. They're symptoms of an economy stretched beyond its natural limit. And this stretch, this constant pushing, mirrors the tension that built up before 1929. But here's what makes today more dangerous. Back then, central banks were bystanders. Today, they are the foundation. Every time the system shakes, central banks step in, lowering rates, injecting liquidity, freezing markets, promising stability. And each intervention becomes a new dependency. It's like giving a patient stronger medicine every time their symptoms worsen. Eventually, the medicine stops helping, and the side effects become the real threat. This wasn't true in 1929, but it's true now. It's the first major difference, and the most alarming one. Because in the 1920s, the collapse came from the outside. Today, the collapse, if it comes, will be internal, from the structure of the system itself. You can see that structure straining in every corner of the global financial network. Look at commercial real estate. Look at consumer credit. Look at tech valuations priced for perfection. Look at speculative markets where money chases anything that moves. This is not confidence. This is momentum pretending to be confidence. And that was exactly the psychology of 1929. Stocks didn't keep rising because they were undervalued. They kept rising because nobody wanted to miss out. It's the same inertia today, only faster, more leveraged, and amplified by technology that didn't exist a century ago. Algorithms don't panic like humans, but they accelerate panic once it begins. In the 1920s, a sell-off took hours to spread. In a modern market, it takes milliseconds. And that speed creates a new kind of vulnerability, the kind where stability looks perfect until the very second it collapses. Because that's how real crashes happen. Not slowly, not with announcements, but with sudden recognition, the moment everyone sees the truth they've been avoiding. And once that moment comes, there is no pause button. This is why the ghost of 1929 feels more relevant than ever. Not because history is repeating, but because the psychology is repeating in a world far more fragile than the one that collapsed 95 years ago. And just like back then, people aren't preparing. They're dismissing, they're explaining, they're rationalizing, until the moment comes when rationalization stops working and the system reveals what it truly is, a machine built on belief. Everything works as long as people believe it works. Everything collapses the moment they don't. And this is where the story tightens, the point where the parallels stop being coincidences and start becoming signals. The climax of 1929 wasn't the crash. It was the moment everyone realized the crash couldn't be stopped. That moment is what changed history. Because once confidence breaks, nothing else matters. Not interest rates, not emergency policies, not government speeches. The system collapses from the inside, long before you see it on a chart. And today, the world is inching toward that same psychological breaking point. You can see it in the tension between investors who say everything is fine, and the data quietly whispering that nothing is fine. You can see it in households drowning in credit they can't repay. You can see it in governments financing themselves through debt that will never be retired. You can see it in markets that rise not because of fundamentals, but because nobody wants to be the first one out. This is the modern echo of 1929, overconfidence balanced on top of instability. And here's the twist. This time, the system is bigger. This time, leverage is global. This time, central banks aren't just referees. They players inside the game they supposed to control. The ghost of 1929 isn't a metaphor anymore. It's a blueprint. Because back then, people believed central banks could save them. Today, people believe the same thing. But the balance sheets are stretched, the tools are weaker, and the consequences are far more severe. The question is no longer, could it happen? The real question is, what breaks first? When you look at the world through the lens of 1929, you don't see predictions, you see patterns. patterns of debt, patterns of speculation, patterns of denial, patterns of confidence rising faster than reality can support. History doesn't repeat, but it does warn. The Great Depression didn't begin with panic. It began with belief. Belief that the good times couldn't end. Belief that markets were invincible. Belief that someone, somewhere, was in control. Today is no different. We stand in a world where the numbers look strong, the headlines sound reassuring, and the risks hide beneath the surface like fault lines waiting for pressure. And maybe nothing breaks. Maybe this time truly is different. But if if the patterns that shaped 1929 are aligning again, then the shock won't come from the crash itself. It will come from the realization that we ignored every sign that led to it. Because the ghost of 1929 isn't here to repeat the past. It's here to remind us that no economy, no market, no nation is immune to the consequences of its own confidence. Subscribe if you want the truth behind global finance, the parts nobody explains, but everyone feels.